Hey everyone, it's Andy here, and in this video I'm going to be painting the first character in a duel from our Deorgard 2 Kickstarter. This video is kindly sponsored by, well, us. Yeah, this is my big plug for you to go check out our Kickstarter running right now called Deorgard Part 2. And well, I just really wanted to paint some figures here on YouTube. Recently, I finished doing the box art for Deorgard, the light elf, over on the Patreon. And yeah, I did a two-part video series, really detailed. We did lots of non-metallic metals and interesting things like that. But what I really wanted to do was, some videos for YouTube, but also make sure that the painting was, accessible. One of the things that's key and really important to us is people paint our figures, enjoy them, and they're not afraid to try them. The reason we choose 54mm specifically as a scale is, say you come from Games Workshop, Warhammer stuff, just like we did, it can be quite intimidating, I think, to, jump into a bigger scale figure, going all the way up to a bust or a 75mm figure. But we really think this is such a nice scale where they're not super big, that they take ages and they're intimidating, but there is room to explore and just have fun painting this slightly bigger model. So my aim with this video series is to paint the dual, both characters, and one is going to be the dark, one is the light, and with that I want to do different things with them. So this first video we're going to paint Uta, the darkness, and this is going to be a really dark, evil kind of color scheme, and I'm going to paint this without any airbrushing. In the next part I'm going to be painting the light elf, and I probably will use the airbrush. Both videos I'm aiming to use simple techniques and trying to minimize the amount of paints and products and things like that, and hopefully showing you that you can paint these miniatures no matter the skill level you're at. I do appreciate that it's really cool having these amazing box arts from people like Eric Swinson, Mark Masklans. They're just super cool, but sometimes me personally, I look at a box art and I think, wow, that's so good. Yeah, maybe I won't bother painting that. And that's really, that's not what I want. So I really like to show you painting these minis in a way that hopefully is fun for everyone. I hope that doesn't come across patronizing in any way. That's not my intention at all. I just really think it's important to show painting these figures like this. So yeah, just let me know your opinions in the comments. Has there been something stopping you from trying a larger scale figure? Yeah, anything to do with what I've spoken about. But let's get stuck into painting this figure, and hopefully you can see it's not that difficult to paint a really cool display figure. So first of all, the prep. I built the figures and they're super easy to build, but you do get a few gaps with resin minis and, well, plastic minis too, I guess. My preference for filling gaps is Milliput. I think that when it dries, you can sand it and it's much better for getting a perfect gap fill as opposed to green stuff or something like that. My main tip is that you try and get a rough shape with it. But the thing is, it becomes a lot nicer to work with as it starts to dry. So maybe an hour later, after you've got it into a basic shape, you can use a clay shaper and it won't be as soft, and you can probably find it easier to get the forms perfect. But yeah, I kind of, as it dries, just every half hour, just keep smoothing it out, and I think that's the key to getting it perfect. And if it's not 100%, you can always sand it, which is really great. Our duel comes as two single figures, but the bases connect really simply. So yeah, you can paint them as individual projects if you just fancy one, but if you want to make this duel, you just glue it together, which is really nice. I establish a direction of light, and I am using the airbrush here, but you can just use a spray can. I would recommend something like Grey Seer or Wraithbone from Citadel. Those spray cans are awesome, they're really smooth, and you'll just spray lightly from one direction, and that's just going to give you a head start in your directional light. Really, for the elf we're painting today, I only want pale colours on the face. So again, if you don't have an airbrush, then don't glue the head on, and maybe prime that in a light colour, and then prime the body in black. I left the weapon off just for access, and you could leave the head separately as well if you want to do that separate primer colour. I have an airbrush, so for me it's easy just to spray the face with white. The skin is going to be painted with very few colours to keep it simple. Cadian flesh tone is one I wanted to use because I think most people are going to have it. I'm going to shade that with some Night Quester flesh, and this isn't a particularly vibrant shadow colour, which I think is suitable for this character, and I think we'll do a richer skin when we paint the other one. And the highlight colour, I'm actually going to use this pastel violet from AK, and I actually changed how I painted the face later in the process because I started using this paint to highlight the black armour, and I loved it so much I decided to incorporate that into the skin as well. I start just by base coating the Cadian flesh all over, and the reason I think a pale colour is better for skin, it makes it way easier to just find where the shadows are going to be. You know, I use it pretty diluted, so it kind of flows into the recesses, almost like a wash, but yeah, it's kind of like a thin base coat to try and find your way, and I just find painting skin over black takes a long time, and since I started painting like this, I haven't looked back. I can see from the spray that there's a dark area here on the cheek, so I might as well block that in the dark colour, the Night Quester flesh, and that's going to give me a good map where I want my light and shadow to be. Then on the light side, I take that same Night Quester flesh, but I add a lot more water to make it into a wash. Don't worry about getting it too precise. If the first passing you do is a little bit too diluted, kind of like I'm doing here, you can always add some more paint back in and go in with a heavier one. But starting with the white base coat, I find this way much easier to try and find the details and things like the eyes and the shading around the nose. And then from there, once that's dried, I'm just going to go ahead and begin the highlighting. I could go back with the Cadian flesh to neaten up any mistakes I've done with the wash, but mine turned out great and I went straight into the highlighting. Now I add the pastel violet, and to begin with, it's going to look like it makes the colour look a little grayer, more desaturated, and I think that's what I want for this skin tone. He is kind of a night elf living in the shadows, so I don't want loads of tone. So I think the violet does a couple things. When we do the first level of highlighting where I've added just a little bit of the violet, it does desaturate the Cadian flesh in a way that we want. But as I start adding more of the violet and the violet comes through, then we get a nice interesting colour on the highlights. I focus the highlights on one side. I think it looks more dramatic to have that kind of asymmetrical light, and to be honest, it's kind of easier. And I think if something looks better, more interesting, and it's easier, that's got to be a win. So I just focus on putting highlights on really one side of the face, the top of the forehead, around the nose, and some parts on the cheek that are going to match up with that highlight on the forehead. After you've highlighted, if you're not happy with anything, you can use the previous colours to do some glazes to blend it all together, or try and get some of the colour back. So I start with glazes of Cadian flesh, and then if I need to, I can also do some glazes with the Night Quester just to blend from our kind of mid-tone into the shadow. But I managed to do an okay job with just layering, and this is just to tweak and kind of perfect it, but get the right amount of shadow on one side. I painted the eyes in just plain black. I thought that would be kind of cool for the character, and I'll do a little white dot as a reflection, but forgive me if I don't get that on camera. That's just always a nightmare. And while I had the black on the palette, I just blocked in all the armor and everything. You can see I'm using the black pretty diluted because, you know, it doesn't matter if it's not a solid black, and it just kind of picks out the recesses, and it's going to help me see where I'm going here anyway. So yeah, just getting everything blocked in after I've done the face I think is a good thing to do, and that skin is looking really cool against the jet black around it. Now we're going to move on to the main thing, which is the armor, and I want to do it black. I just think it's cool, and I was thinking about tinting it with a color, but actually I'm going to go for a reasonably neutral black, and we'll use a little bit of violet for the final highlights. But this first highlight is German Grey from AK, and this is a perfect first highlight from black. and it just kind of allows you to see where you're going. So I'm just going to pick out almost all of the details, not edge highlighting yet. I'm just kind of blocking in the big areas that are in the light, and I'm only leaving parts that are really kind of in the shadow, pure black. Most of this focal area around the chest is going to get a big block-in highlight with this German grey. I then use some AK dark grey. It's a nice jump up from the German grey. If you wanted to simplify it, you could just mix black with dark grey, then you'd go into your dark grey now. But I wanted to try and use not too many mixes just to simplify it. And I really do like that German grey as a first highlight. What I'm going to do now is be more sparing with my highlights and try to draw some focus to the centre of the chest and things like that. I'm not going to paint everything with the same intensity. I want to do brighter highlights around the top and things like the bottom of the legs and the back. You know, I don't need to do much more highlighting than the dark grey. I'll really push them nice and bright up here, and that's going to be nice and time efficient. So try to do highlighting with the dark grey all around, and as we get brighter, you can start leaving bits behind. So really simply, we're going to just add a little bit of pastel violet gradually until we think we've got a bright enough highlight. So I'll just do a layer and then see how that looks. And if I decide I want to go brighter, I'm just going to add some more of that pastel violet into the mix until I'm satisfied. And this is really fun. I enjoy this part. Once we've highlighted everything with dark grey, we really need to just do really nice and small highlights to make it look like a shiny black. And that means even though we're going to add a lot of steps, they really don't take very long, especially as I'm just focusing, like I said, on the upper areas around the chest. I know I've finished the lower legs and things like that. I'm really just trying to push the focus around those interesting bits at the top. I do slightly bigger highlights around the chest because that's going to give me more room later to add brighter highlights. But the lower parts that I know I'm not going to take too bright, I start to edge highlight with this colour. So as you get brighter, you're going to reduce the amount that you work on and just try and do tighter and tighter highlights. You can see the tone coming out here. It's not a super interesting black colour, but it does have some tone to it, and I think that's what I wanted really. I did want this to be, just a pure black rather than a blue black or a really strong purpley one. With more violet in the mix, we're starting to get some punch now, and this is where it's going to begin to look more like a shiny black. And I love watching things come together as you gradually add these highlights in, and you just get that real impact. I know it's my own figure, so I've got some bias or whatever, but I really like the shapes on this armor. I like the lines that run across it because it's really effective when you edge highlight all of those and, just put little dots on the corners and stuff like that. But it's really fun, and personally I really enjoy painting black, so this was just a joy to gradually layer up, not use any crazy techniques, just take our time to do nice, neat and tidy highlights. And keep getting brighter until we think it looks cool. As we get closer to getting almost to that pastel violet on its own, I'm very sparing and I just do the top parts in the chest and the kind of piece around his neck in the end. And this is the beauty of this, is you can, get so much impact, and from afar the figure's going to look really cool, super shiny black, but you don't have to necessarily render every single part like this, because not all of it is going to be facing our main light here. But I just love adding these little spots, and you see they don't take very long, and it just does so much. I finished with a final highlight of the violet on its own, and it's got a little bit of water in, so it's smooth, and that means the color isn't super powerful, but I think that's right, just a subtle amount of violet, but against that dark black in the shadows, I think the slight violet tone looks really good. And I've managed to get the shiny, almost beetle-like carapace look that I was going for. Super happy looking at that kind of, not final shot, but looking at the black almost finished. I haven't finished the black on every part. I think it's tough to do all of the black in one go. So I'll probably come back and do the plates on the hip and things like that. But I fancied starting the metallics to see how that looked against the black. One thing that's difficult with metallics is we can't control the shine. So sometimes we want a shadow, but the metallic paint is, well, it's shining in the light, so the shadows don't look that dark. So what I'm experimenting here is mixing in a matte paint, in this case Rhinox Hide, with some Rune Lord Brass for the base coat. And you have to experiment and add the right amount so it doesn't look too matte, but actually having a slightly matter shadow will give me more control in having my lights and shadows. And then I'll highlight with some metallic paints on their own, and these should really shine in the highlight parts that I want. But luckily, the colour of Rhinox Hide mixed with the Rune Lord Brass is really nice. It's, I don't know, it's just got this nice tone to it, and I'm really happy with that. So quite a simple job now. Where there's really bright highlights for the black, then I do a kind of large highlight with the Rune Lord Brass on its own, and any parts that are in the shadows, I just highlight the edges of the metallic with the Rune Lord Brass. And just watching this come together as I record the audio, I think it looks great. I really like how the black's looking, and this colour of metallic I think works really well against the violet black. And just picking out the highlights to match what I've already done, I think is quite simple in your head, really. You've just got to do that base coat mixed with the matte paint, now go in with that Rune Lord Brass and match all those highlights with the ones you've already done on the black. I push a step further by adding in some light bronze from Pro Acryl. This is a fantastic paint for highlighting any gold or bronze. It's just like a really pale silver with a little bit of tone to it. And I just focus these highlights really where I need the metallics to pop around the chest. And that's just to give some balance so they are as bright and intense as the black highlights that we've done. But really simple, these metallics, and this is what I wanted to get across in this video. We've just done the metallics in 3 steps, nice and simple. You've just got to take your time and try and do a neat job. Those are kind of the main elements done. We've done the face, we've done the black armor, and we've done the gold trims. That's kind of, the main part, and I'm really happy where I'm heading with it. So now we just got to finish off some details. There's a little bit of leather, hair, and horn, stuff like that. But this is the main thing you need to put your energy into, I think, these main details. And then the little parts, they're going to be quite easy. I didn't use any purple in the armor. Well, I used pastel violet, so I guess that's a complete lie, but it's not that purple. So I treat myself to doing a desaturated purple on the small leather trim parts. I use scale 75 black leather, and this is a really boring, dull, desaturated purple, and it's super matte, and that's the reason I like it. It's not vibrant or vivid at all. So I just kind of block everything but the darkest shadows in this, and then I just add some pastel violet or white or ivory. It really doesn't matter into this. I do some edge highlighting, but I also do some random scratches and texture just to make it look different from the armor plates. And this is just a really nice, easy thing to do, building up with some more white gradually. And I love kind of finishing the big main elements like the black armor, the face, and getting to these parts because I know they're not going to take very long, and I'm hopefully not going to mess them up either. I did a few glazes of black leather just to kind of tone down the highlights I'd done, but also blend it together. And then I finished by reapplying my previous highlight just to get it, really blended together and a nice little punch at the end. I did the silver chainmail and the spear tip the same way, and much like the face, I base coated with a really bright silver, and then I did a wash actually with a darker metal. And this is my preference for painting metallics. I've always tried to develop my technique and find better ways of doing them, and I think this actually really helps. Something like Citadel Iron Warriors is actually really good to do as a wash over your pale silvers as a head start. I then decided to try using some Rhinox hide, really diluted, just to kind of match the matte appearance that we used in the bronze trim. I definitely think this worked, but maybe using a contrast paint with some brown in could be better, or even mixing a little Rhinox hide in with Iron Warriors and doing that as a wash. Either way, I'm happy how it turned out, and you can re-highlight any of the scales if they turn out a little bit too matte. He has two large horns, and I wanted to do these as bone. I did one on the side as if it was metallic trim, but I think these two in the center look slightly different. So I base coated these with, again, Rhinox hide. I tried to use as few paints as possible, keep the palette tight and reuse paints where I can. I then mixed in some Scale 75 Gobi Brown, which is one of my favorite paints, and it's a dull greenish brown, but it's really nice for painting horn with. I built up just trying to paint striations and little lines, getting brighter towards the bottom, which I hoped would draw focus again towards the face. And I leave quite a lot of the horn dark, and I think that's just going to help with the overall feeling of this figure. I then start to mix in some Ushabti bone or Screaming Skull, and this has a nice amount of yellow to it, and it works really well with the Gobi Brown. And I think it just has the right balance of saturation, and I like the cold brown tone. For me, this just works really nicely for bone colors. That's why I like the Gobi Brown so much. It's just that kind of greenish color it has to it. I came to do the hair, and I was thinking about doing it blonde, and when I did those horns, I noticed my mix of Gobi Brown and Ushabti I thought might be the perfect colour for a kind of dirty blonde shadow. So I started to base coat the hair, and yeah, I really think this works. Again, I'm, not adding in more paint, using as few paints as I can for the entire project, and I really think this blonde colour is right. I was thinking about doing the hair, just a white, and I was thinking about black. Then I thought about blonde, but I don't want it to be like a really vivid yellow blonde. It needs to be this dull kind of desaturated one. And yeah, I think this just worked really well. I then followed the sculpt with Ushabti bone, but I tried to focus on, creating a highlight on top of the hair, just following the forms and drawing the eye again to the top of the face. So I do quite big, large highlights around the focal area, and I try and fade it away by doing skinnier lines and picking out the individual hairs as we get further away from the top of the face. I then pushed these lights with Screaming Skull, and I also added in some ivory to kind of finish off the hair. It's difficult to follow the sculpt sometimes, but just try and do your brush stroke in the direction of the hair, and it doesn't matter too much if you haven't followed the sculpting perfectly. It's more important that you get an impression of the overall shape of the hair as opposed to picking out the individual ones. I think the general view of the hair is more important than when you look up close having, each part picked out individually. You just want that impact of light hitting the hair. And that is the miniature finished. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed painting it, more than I thought I would actually. And I've tried some new stuff. I really like the colour for the blonde hair. That's just a nice tone. I really enjoyed painting the metallics. And yeah, just some new recipes like the one for the black. That turned out really well. It was just a nice process. My intention for this video was to show you painting display figures and large scale figures. Doesn't have to be crazy or using super difficult techniques, so I really hope that's come across. So if you've got something you've always been worried about trying, then please, I encourage you, get stuck in, just get some paint on it, and yeah, you'll see it's not as difficult as maybe you think. If you like the channel, please consider supporting us over on our Kickstarter right now. There's some really cool miniatures there, and yeah, if you haven't tried a large scale miniature before, this is a great one to try something different. Any of your support that you give for us here on YouTube and over on the Kickstarter is going to help me and Henry produce more cool miniatures, and I promise they won't be elves. We will have some dwarves and orcs coming. So yeah, check out the Kickstarter. In the next part, we're going to paint the other half of this, Steora, the light, and we'll probably do a different style, go pretty airbrush heavy on that one when we haven't used the airbrush at all in this one, just to kind of mix it up and show you different things. Anyway, I really want to know your thoughts on this video, and if you haven't tried large scale figures before, let me know if this video has made it seem more approachable. It's really important to us so we can improve the videos and get things right. Anyway, I'll see you in part 2, and I'm looking forward to finishing this awesome looking jewel. See you then.